Welcome back to AP World History. This is chapter 18. We're looking at Russian history. We can see that uh, Russia's beginnings in Kiev around the 9th century and will continue up into modern day. You could probably say about the Russian people, they at least the aristocrats, the rulers, practiced a bad neighbor policy. They always seemed to want to take other people's land by conquest. They were always seeking a warm water port so they could trade with the rest of the world. Uh, and they're still seeking a warm water port. Um, in terms of the different rulers, some notable ones that we probably looked at was Vladimir I, who was responsible for bringing the Eastern Orthodox Church to Russia. We also looked at the Mongols, who controlled Russia for about 200 years. Ivan III is going to be responsible for casting the Mongols out, the Tartars, who is then replaced by Ivan IV or Ivan the Terrible, who brings the aristocrats under his control. Very ruthless leader, and he practices a bad neighbor policy. Now, the Romanovs are going to rule for 300 years, approximately. They'll rule right up until the communists take over toward the end of World War I, and they will sue. The communists will sue for peace, and at the meantime, they will kill off the Romanov rulers. Uh, Alexander. This shows the line of succession. Peter the Great and Catherine, probably the most notable. Peter the First, or Peter the Great, ruled for about 35 years. He was instrumental in westernizing Russia. He could see that Russia was behind Western Europe. During the Mongol period, they sort of were cut off from the rest of the world. Um, but he very much wants to be like some of the Western powers, Germany, uh, England, France, Italy. Uh, he establishes a meritocracy and a table of ranks. This meritocracy was based on your ability. He will establish foreign bureaucrats, send ambassadors to different parts of the world. He will divide his empire into 50 provinces. The Holy Roman or Church, the Byzantine influence, Eastern Orthodox Church is going to be an instrumental part of his rule. But he will bring the boyars and the church under his control. He will establish St. Petersburg as the capital of Russia in 1703 and make that into a westernized city. He established schools for engineering, military science, and artillery. Established the first Russian Navy in the Black Sea. Conducted the Great Northern War against Sweden. And again, was always looking for a warm water port. And again, he's a very ruthless leader. All power residing with him. Absolute power. His power comes from God, he believes. This shows conflicts with Poland, particularly with Sweden. The Swedes will lose, and the Russians will expand into the Baltic area. But unfortunately, this area freezes during the winter, and so they still need a warm water port. St. Petersburg, a city built on bones, which meant that there was a lot of suffering in terms of the peasants and the workers who built this city. He wasn't concerned about human life, just to achieve his objectives. often called the Russian Versailles, similar to it was patterned after some of the European cities. Uh, St. Petersburg will be changed to Leningrad, and then later in 1991 we'll come back to St. Petersburg. He is going to be his successor will be Catherine II or Catherine the Great. Uh, Married Peter III. She actually was brought in from uh, Austrian-Hungary Empire. She married Peter III, and she really is the power and behind the throne. She will eventually take the throne and try to institute some reforms, but for the most part, she ruled absolutely. Uh, Helped partition Poland 3 different times. Uh, was influenced by the Enlightened philosophers. Um, so you could say that she was an enlightened despot or dictator. Diderot and some of those Voltaire influenced her thinking. This shows the partition of Poland by the Russians, and they're getting their little piece of the pie. She questioned serfdom, but never really ended that during her reign. Torture, capital punishment wasn't as prevalent under her reign as it was under Peter the Great. She will establish elementary schools. She will establish engineering and teacher training. And during her reign, the nobility or the boyars will increase power. Pugnevich rebellion occurs in the 1800s or 18th century. This particular person claimed that he was Peter the Third. He had about 25,000 followers. Unfortunately, the uprising was crushed, and he's going to be executed in Moscow for treason. Pugnevich. So there is unrest in Russia, but the czars rule with an iron hand. Alexander the First is going to rule for about 25 years. He was a grandson of Catherine the Great or Catherine the Second. Had a friendly relation with Napoleon, but later is going to fight Napoleon. And eventually Napoleon will be defeated in Russia and retreat back to Europe. Participated in the Congress of Vienna in 1814 and 15, trying to decide how Europe could best deal with France. There were hopes of reforms during his reign, but he becomes very autocratic, dictatorial, believes in absolute rule, and reverts back to this conservatism that is the royalty first. Oktoberfest revolt took place towards the end of his reign. This was a secret society, and he will put this down very harshly. His motto was aristocracy, orthodoxy, and nation. So he believed in the ruling class, he believed in the church, and he believed in a strong Russia. And he will suppress liberal thought that Europe has experienced during the Enlightenment period. And we'll stop right there.